The next thing I knew, I was standing on the balcony of an apartment building and I was looking out and there was like this nuclear bomb going off in the distance. And it was like this nuclear disaster. And then boom, I was awake. And I can tell you that the feeling I had was that the consciousness was a predatory one in the sense that it was stronger than us. It felt like a shark or like a cat. It was bigger than me.
Have you ever had an opportunity right up your rescue with John
Hello and welcome to The Psychic Guys. I'm your host, David Harker, and I'm joined by my co-conspirators and fellow psychic guys, Josh Floto and the inimitable Daz Smith. Today we're welcoming Amaris Jane to the podcast to share her journey from growing up in a haunted house to developing as a remote viewer, a tarot reader, and astral traveler, amongst other extraordinary psychic and paranormal chapters to her life. Welcome, Amaris.
Oh, well, thank you so much, David. It's great to be here.
So I guess we should begin at the beginning. You grew up in a house with a poltergeist, is that right?
This is true. It wasn't the house I was born in. I grew up in a really remote Canadian northern community. And after spending some time there, having a formative, amazing childhood before computers, when you could do things and nobody recorded it. I had lots of great BMX nights and watching ET and living the Stranger Things life. I had a great childhood in that way. But then when I was about 11, my parents divorced. And I don't know, I don't know if you guys have heard any research around this, and I've been looking into it. There's something about single mothers and hauntings that I've been wondering about, and I've heard quite a bit about. So I'm actually interested in this area of inquiry. But my mom, my sister, my brother, and I, we moved into a house in another Canadian city. And little did we know, we weren't the only occupants of that house. So the story goes from there. It was complicated because, I feel like anytime there's stress or brokenness in a family, it leaves opportunities for strange things to happen. And my mom was she's a remarkable person. She's a very spiritual person. And she did everything on her own. She worked full time. She took care of us. And at the same time was you kind of battling this unknown poltergeist activity. And she really didn't know what to do with it. And I think I was probably about 13 when it got really significant. And at that same time, I started having out of body experiences. So I was having these spontaneous out of body experiences, falling asleep, waking up, floating around my room and not really having a context for what that was. And then also, going upstairs and having my key or my mother's keys float, above the dishwasher and then fall. Curtains open, and the curtain story is a good one. I'll save that one for a bit later. Um, Voices in the hallway, orbs, lots of orbs. And we used to have people that would just come over to our house just to see, like, friend groups, like, because we grew up in an era where we didn't have a lot of entertainment. I don't know, maybe you guys can relate to this being more Gen X or Zennials, but we didn't have a lot of entertainment. So poltergeist activity was kind of super exciting, and the neighborhood really liked it. So our parties were off the hook. We had the local ghost, and we had a blast. I'm not even gonna lie.
So do people come around to see if the poltergeist would put on a show for them?
Oh, and it did, absolutely, and it did.
Wow.
So one of the things that the poltergeist did was it played music through our fireplace. So at first we thought, is that just wind, coming in? And I was like, well, I've lived in lots of places with fireplace. I've never heard of wind coming in and making it sound like an old pipe organ before. But in this particular house, it played pipe music, like pipe organ music. I would say, a good 50% of the day. And it would get so loud that we could hear it through the vents. So the fireplace was in the basement, and it was quite a big house actually. And so we'd be up on the second floor, and the music would be coming up through the vents. So we could hear it. So we'd have our friends over, we'd all be sitting around listening to the organ playing in the house. And every sometimes, oh, there's an orb, or someone's, I heard a voice. And it was like, on one hand, it was a very kind of creepy thing when you're young, right? Because it's unknown. But we also kind of engaged the phenomenon, so to speak, I would say.
That's interesting. It's very similar to how I was brought up. I had a very similar experience from the age of 5 to 8. House before I moved to this house, because I've been here for 40 odd years. We had poltergeist activity as well. as a young child, and it used to running up and down the stairs, or you could be downstairs and hear it running in the rooms upstairs, and it would turn all the lights on as well. Not as making music like your one, but yeah, very very similar experiences for me as well.
So you know that feeling of what is this, but all curiosity and dread at the same
Yeah,
time.
yeah. I don't think it was. I don't think it wanted the harmony. I think it just wanted attention. But
Yeah,
when you're that young, you do find it a little bit spooky, but kind of exciting at the same time.
right. It is. It's both, and that's a really important point, Daz. That it is both. I
Yeah.
love that. Yeah.
Amaris, did you find that your like the way you felt towards it changed over time then? Did it start off being frightening and then it got more and more something you were comfortable with that was just part of the house? Or did it always retain that spookiness?
That's interesting. There's quite a progression that goes into my adult life with this, but we'll stick back to the good old days. Okay. For me, because I was a teenager and I was a gutsy teenager, I was a, kind of hitchhike across the country kind of kid, and have fun. And so for me, I think I didn't take it too seriously, but my mother did. So I felt protective of her. Um, and so that in that regard, like I had the basement bedroom in my house in the back, and that's where everybody felt the energy coming from. So you got to wonder, what's wrong with this person that they're, a teenager, they have the ghost bedroom essentially in the house. But I think I was just such an adventurous person, and so kind of caught up in being a teenager that I almost didn't care, on one hand. On the other hand, I was like, "Oh, bonus, this is interesting." So it did get a bit creepier as I got older, though, because moving from that phase into more my later teens, I started to have out of body experiences, like 3 or 4 times a day. I wouldn't even be able to lay down to sleep without, kind of coming out of my body. So that got a little bit. That was actually a scarier, more disruptive experience for me than growing up in a haunted house. So, but yeah, I have a couple of good stories from the haunted house that I could share.
So with these out of body experiences, did it just kind of like start happening one day, or was there like an event that triggered that?
I grew up in a spiritual family that always talked about spiritual experience. My mother, especially talked about spirit visitation, but it was a very, very, very Christian lens. But still, it was like a mystical Christian lens. So spirituality was something that I think I was open to, without quite understanding it. So when the out of body experiences started, I was 13, and I had the classic out of body experience where you see the silver cord, you see yourself, your own body, you move around. I could hear and see things around. And it didn't scare me at first because it was just so interesting. But then when I got a little bit older, when I was about 18, 17, 18, it started happening rapidly, and I would fall asleep, and within a few seconds, just in that between sleep and awake state, I would be in the out of body state, but I didn't understand that's what it was. So I was, because I grew up with a Christian lens, it scared me. So I think it really didn't do me service to be uneducated about these things. And that's why I'm really thankful that the sci efforts that are happening in our modern era are starting to talk about these things, as science and also as experience, and that there's a bridge between those two. Because in my younger years, I probably would have had a very different experience, in my life if I had not felt as afraid. But here, in those years, this would have been in probably the late '90s, early 2000s. It was like, people were like, "Oh, you've got a demon," and you're like, "Oh, great." Who wants a demon, right? It's like, no, no, I don't want a demon. Well, don't tell me that there's demons bothering me when I'm sleeping. So, but it scared me enough, and so there was about 3 or 4 years where had really disrupted sleep, and it took its toll on me. And I was like, whatever this spiritual stuff is, I'm kind of done because I'm so worn out, and I don't know what it is. And there would always be people walking around me when I go into the out of body state, so I could hear beings, walking by me. There was few encounters where I encountered beautiful light beings, which I would describe as angels, for lack of a better term, that were very helpful. So when I was afraid, I would have these beings that would come and soothe me. And then sometimes I'd encounter beings which weren't quite as soothing, and maybe had intentions, to be a bit more intimidating. But I got so used to it that it stopped scaring me, eventually. But it became annoying more than anything. I was like, yeah, I got to figure out what to do next with my life. So I kind of did like like what a cleanse, but like a spirituality cleanse. I was like, done. Let's get some academia. Let's do something different. That's where it ended up eventually. Was I was just tired of being tired from not really having a lens for it.
So when that first began happening, did you feel you could speak about it, or was it something you felt you had to keep to yourself?
I didn't really have a community of people I could speak to. It was, this is like just let's see how it internet days. At that time there was like what chat rooms where people I would never know where to
Yeah.
look for something to reach out. And I lived in a small Canadian city, so there wasn't really any resources. And I didn't really know anybody, so I didn't have that support. So I try to provide that support to people now when I can. That's very meaningful to me in my work.
And you said you had like a spirituality cleanse and decided to go off to academia. Did that stop these things happening, the kind of pushing it away, or did you bring it under control some other way?
I think there was a couple ways. I think but there was a concerted effort on my part to kind of turn away from the intensity of the spiritual practice and the focus rather. And I also started to exercise a lot more, which brought, and if people don't know this, exercise and movement actually can help if you're having repeated out of body experiences. Toning the body can bring that anxiety down, or that tendency so that you sleep more deeply. That will help if you're having those experiences. But I also ended up having to take a medication for a while, to manage it because it was just too much. Like I couldn't live a normal life. So I, just like had like just your over the counter, not over the counter, but like your just run of the mill sleeping pill, and that helped. It helped a lot. And so I was able to kind of start a normal life. And then it was at that point that I decided to kind of pivot into academia.
So did you go into psychology straight away?
Well, I went into university kind of with a adventurous mind because that's just how I approach everything. Kind of not knowing what I wanted to do, and as I got in there, Canada's a country that has a lot of, remarkably, we're like a very multicultural country. We have a lot of great things. We have, people who love to talk about our healthcare. It's pretty good unless you're, waiting for treatment for here for something. But overall, Canada's got a lot of benefits. But our history with its Indigenous people is a dark one, and it's something that I grew up in a northern community, and so I saw, I was very close with Indigenous. My friend growing up, all my best friends were Indigenous. Like I grew up around Indigenous communities, and so when I started university and I started to learn about colonialism, and I started to learn about kind of the history more deeply. I felt really like it was my responsibility to become educated about Canada's history in that way. So I started to study literature. I started to study anything that gave me kind of an insight into kind of like this sort of like intentional process of kind of trying to take indigeneity out of Canada, and how I could help participate in healing that in any way. So that really kind of became my focus in my interest of area of study. But then from there, I just realized I was good with people, and when you're good with people, it's like play to your strengths. If you're someone who's a good talker, well, then get a job where you talk. And so I realized that, I was the type of person that people came to when they had a problem, or they were like, what do you think about this? So I was like, well, maybe I'd be not too bad at doing something like, being a psychologist or a therapist, or, something like that. So I did turn my studies toward the practical in that regard in about my fourth year of university. And that was a big shift. It was tough being academic and being a naturally spiritual person, an intuitive person rather. I would say it's a tough mix. It wasn't an easy journey.
Yeah, I did have a time in my life when I was circling around the event horizon of academia, but it was before I got into any of these topics, so I didn't have that going on much at the time, and I still decided to get out of it. It's
Yeah,
yeah, a difficult place to be.
yeah, yeah. I'll say intuition did help me write quite a few of my papers though, because
Oh yeah,
I could read what people were looking to read, right? I could pick up on the intuitive aspect of things, and in my line of work. So I'm not a psychologist, I'm a social worker. So I have a master's of social work. So the difference between social work and psychology is that social work concentrates on groups, kind of like sociology. But we look at communities as a whole, being part of challenges, social challenges, versus seeing the problem in the individuals. So psychology is a great practice, but it does tend to locate any sort of issue or problem within the person versus the circle around them. So the work I do really focuses on the community, and I think it applies. I think social work and the UFO. What's going on in the UFO world right now? I feel like they could overlap quite well. We need some social workers up in there.
Yeah, they could certainly use some help.
Yeah.
So, other than scoring really well on your papers for your degree, I think I had the experience as well. The less time I left to do a paper, the better I would do, because actually the intellect is switched off. I'm in a big rush. It's 2 a.m. and I have to get it in the next day, and I would do great. And then if I leave 2 weeks for it and go, no, I'm gonna be a grown up, and I'm gonna leave plenty of time and do my research. Terrible grade. So yeah, you gotta just let it flow when it needs to. So when did your spiritual stuff start coming back into your life? Was that through the social work practice, or did this happen in parallel?
It was so it was during my master's degree. My husband is he's also like a really esoteric kind of guy. He loves haunted things. Like, and I'd be honest with you, like because of my experience in my earlier years of just feeling burnt out by that stuff, I really did do like a kind of a 180 and turn away from the spiritual. So I really, when I went into academia, I was in, I was planning on being a professor. I was going for my doctorate. I had a full plan to really focus on that. And my husband was like, well, let's watch a show about aliens, let's do this. And I was like, oh, and it kind of annoyed me because I was like, I don't want that in my life anymore. You can't understand where I come from. And I think that maybe there's a trauma aspect to growing up in that life and then wanting to turn away from it, right? And he's like, no, but so eventually, I'll be honest, like, thank God for him, because I think, the joy that I experience in my current life really comes from his repeated interest in these topics and kind of helping me let go of the strictures of academia and also kind of reinvite the spirituality back in, but with a new lens. And I had that opportunity very spontaneously, probably in 2018. Me and my attempts to be a good wife. I saw this haunted house tour that was going on in our community, and I thought, oh gosh, he's gonna love that. We're gonna do this. We're gonna get the tour, and I'm gonna go with him, and I'm gonna be a good wife, and I'm gonna be so nice, and I'm gonna do this thing. And even if I don't care about it or believe in it, I'm gonna go along. Well, let's just say we showed up there. They give you those, the electromagnetic readers for of course, what do you think happens, right? The lights start flashing on me everywhere we go. There's a line of people behind me while all these like flashing light, and I'm going, what's going on? Like, I thought it's broken, right? Maybe that's what it is. But the ghosts are following me everywhere. And then we went into another side room where they had like, psychic tools like pendulums and dowsing rods and these sorts of things. And I picked up the pendulum, and my goodness, this thing started just moving. And I had never, like, in all my experiences, they'd always been very like internal state psi experiences. I'd never had a physical psi experience like that, where I picked something up and it would move at the command of my mind. And that just, like, for some reason, of all the remarkable things I experienced, that just kind of threw me for a loop. I was like, oh wow, like, this is evidence. This is a physical type evidence that I can show somebody else. They can do it and experience it. So it's not just me experiencing this anymore. It's not just me and my little world feeling kind of cuckoo. I could hand this to somebody else and they could have kind of a side experience on their own. And there's something about that just kind of woke me up. And then we started kind of going on a few more haunted house tours. And sure enough, the lights would follow me and the pendulums would swing. And, I was like, oh boy, do I need to call a spade and just like do some radical acceptance here and, be the ghost lady? Maybe so.
Did that lead to any kind of formal training?
It did, absolutely. I not right away though. At the beginning, the pandemic hit about a year and a half. It was about a year and a half after that initial awakening, or maybe even less. I think it was just late 2000, because it was October of 2018 that I had that. And then just over a year later, the pandemic hit. And so any plans I had to kind of go deeper into that esoteric work were impacted by kind of the isolation. But that didn't stop me from investigating. So I thought someone bought me a tarot deck as a gift, and they said, "Well, try this." And I thought, well, isn't that kind of creepy? I don't know. Sure enough, I started turning tarot cards over, and I found out very quickly that indeed the tarot is a legitimate practice. I remember the first time that a card showed up for me repeatedly, and I would get obsessive about shuffling so that there's no way the cards could accidentally, kind of pop out the same time every day. And but I would get the same card, 70% of the time on my draw, and I'm going, what is happening? And so that, then I became really intentional about understanding the tarot. So I went really deep into that, and just spent a lot of my time practicing reading, doing readings for people because I didn't really have anything else to do during the pandemic. And I did have spontaneous mediumship experiences that started. There's a lot. I mean, this is where all of it kind of starts, the modern stuff.
I had a moment when I was initially getting into tarot where at first I didn't go with physical cards. I downloaded some phone apps just to see what would happen. And the first app I downloaded, I gave it the query, will you answer a yes or no question? And it drew the 8 of coins, which I personally interpreted as a yes. I was like, okay, downloaded a second app and was like, all right, well, let's see what happens. Will you answer a yes or no question? And it was the 8 of coins.
Oh, wow. Yeah, there you
Again,
go.
what I
That's
like
cool.
about it is even if we weren't talking about the ability to like psychically perceive the future using the cards or anything like that, there's even if you want to like not use any of the woo-woo aspects of it, it's a very valuable tool for you ask a question, you look at the card, and then it prompts you to think introspectively about things. I'm a fan of the tarot.
Oh, that's great. Well, I'm super happy to hear that. That's a very insightful reflection on it as well.
My wife reads tarot, and she's had that same experience of being chased by the same card for like months on end. It wouldn't leave her alone.
Oh, wow. That's awesome. I hope it was a good card. I hope it was a good card.
It was.
Oh, awesome. Even
But I
better.
guess it's like it's something that you have to pay attention to, isn't it? And until you do, it's going to keep coming up.
Yeah, it's our intuition tapping into that narrative storytelling aspect of reality, and we pair with it, and it'll give us wisdom and knowledge to grow
Yeah.
in many aspects.
Seems like tarot is a rite of passage for most of us because I think that's what I spent my early teenage years learning were different decks of tarot cards as well.
Oh, wonderful. Oh, we've got a tarot community here. This is great.
Oh yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
I've done a bit of tarot too. I mean, I don't
I-
tend to do it much anymore because of the remote viewing practice, because
Yeah.
it's just clearer to just be psychic. But I do keep it for when I get super stuck. If I'm ever just completely stuck, it's
Yeah.
a good unsticking tool.
It's also fantastic for a situation where you are trying to investigate something that
Yeah.
we don't have the time to follow blind protocols. You don't want to sit there and wait for like, all right, I've written out this target for myself. Now I just have to forget about it and then hopefully draw it in my big bag of self-task targets. It's really good for like just investigating something where you're blind to the answer, but like completely front-loaded to the question.
That's a great point.
Right. Let's stop having a big love-in about tarot because we're getting sidetracked here.
We'd all be whipping tarot card decks out in
Hang on, I've got mine down.
yeah, and comparing tarot decks.
Are you one of those people with like a whole bookshelf full of tarot decks?
Well, I wouldn't say just a bookshelf. I have if I had it here with me, I have it in another room, but I have like an actual like wooden case that I keep all my decks in that are lined up so that I can pull the right ones out when I'm doing different types of readings. It's kind of like like a doctor carried around there. I've got my tarot.
Mm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Very
My
pro.
my medicine bag.
So right, how did we get from reading tarot in lockdown when everything was closed to remote viewing?
So my husband, again, wonderful esoteric guy, very interested in these things. Has always been passionate about remote viewing. It's something I think he saw Men Who Stare at Goats when it first came out, and it was just like that was the I think a few people probably can relate to that being their kind of a genesis moment of whoa, what is this? And I think for him, he really got interested, and so he talked about it all the time. And we're watching interviews of Joe, and you know, um, anything we could find that was like remote viewing related, he was just really passionate about it. And I'll be honest, like I paid attention some of the time, but not a whole lot of the time. now I could say I can draw on some of that knowledge and wisdom that he probably could have at the tip of his tongue. Um, but he was so interested in it and eventually found out that Lynn Buchanan was still teaching. And he got really excited about that and decided to contact Lynn. And he started taking a CRV with Lynn. And he did quite well. And Lynn's also a great person. Like, he's just a really warm and wonderful man. And so I was just I was riding passenger while he was studying CRV with Lynn. And so I learned, I did actually pay attention in that case, and I learned about CRV and stuff. But I was like, how to be honest, like for me, psychic experiences were always very immediate for me. Like, if I sat and started to think about something, I'm like that intuitive side of me is very immediate. It doesn't, if I let my brain go, the other side comes in with a story, and the story's usually wrong. So I felt challenged by kind of the steps of remote viewing, and I thought, well, I don't think that there's a way for me to learn this, because maybe it's like ADHD or something. I don't know, like, what is the excuse that I can't focus on this, and my husband really could focus on it really well. And then somehow we were watching a podcast, and we saw a podcast with Angela, and she said, "Oh no, remote viewing, it's all ESP." And I thought, "What?" I said, "No, no, no. Remote viewing has a lot of steps to it," which I honestly like. I think CRV is amazing. I don't know why it didn't work for me, you guys. Like, I'm a full supporter of CRV. It did not work for me. So when I saw Angela say it's ESP, I thought, "Oh, maybe she's taking students." So my husband said, "Well, the wonderful thing about Angela is that she's also such an open person. She puts her phone number in her podcast. Like, she does a podcast experience, and she's like, 'Hey, just call me for a reading.'" Is that so? I think this was probably, in the last 2 years. I can't remember the actual date. Jason said, "Hey, you know what? Let's call Angela and see if she's teaching." And I said, "Okay." I said, "Sure, let's do it." So we called Angela, and she said, "Oh, hi, yeah, you're Canadians, oh yeah, sure, I'll do some readings for you. And then we'll see about getting courses set up." And she wasn't teaching at that time, and she didn't have anything going, but she said that there would be some opportunities. So I thought, okay, fine. But she did a reading for us, and she identified us both as people that would be work at remote viewing. And through her reading, which I was, after having kind of been in academia, had this reawakening. It was a very to have a psychic remote view from Stargate tell you that, yeah, you're going to be good at this. And I thought, oh boy, she's at least got faith in me. Maybe maybe that'll rub off and it'll work. And then I feel like in this world, and you guys know this because you're remote viewers, you just make connections, right? Like, you meet one person, and then they introduce you to something. You meet another person, and you meet another person. And we did take lessons with Angela, and it was apparent that her and I have the same style of remote viewing. We get information within a very short period of time. It happens very quickly, and we also both use tarot and other. She uses numerology and some other methods as well. Automatic writing is Angela's specialty. I don't use anything like that, but I do draw very. It just comes very quickly. And so yeah, that's what I'd say. Like, that's how it went into that. And then I guess I wasn't bad at it. So then I started making connections and started doing professional work in this field.
Going back to your point about CRV not working for you, I wonder if it's because CRV was cooked up to teach soldiers how to be psychics. It's like getting you from being not psychic to being psychic, but you're already having all those experiences. It's a natural thing for you.
Yes, I wonder. I wish I knew more about CRV to be able to speak to that, but that's a very good point. That's a very good point.
Daz, do you have something to add there?
Yeah, well,
You're shaking your head.
I was highly psychic before I trained in CRV, and I found CRV to be good for me because I think it just depends on who you are as a person. Some of us like structure and organization, and some of us like freedom and spontaneity. I didn't like the spontaneity and freedom of what I would call classical psychic work. It was just the process was in control. I liked the fact that CRV made me the master, and I was in control. So I did, yeah. So it doesn't quite work that it teaches non-psychic people to be better psychic, because I was already very good at what I was doing, but CRV made me better. As I said, I think it just depends on who you are as a person, really.
Hmm.
Mhm.
I think disciplined structured practice is going to make you better, isn't it? And CRV and all the other methods
In
provide
anything you
that
do. Yeah, absolutely.
framework.
You guys don't use a proper formal kind of really structured CRV method. I mean, you trained in that kind of stuff, but you don't really use it now.
I don't use it anymore. Well, because I kind of see it as their training system, and they're really good training systems, and they teach all these skills. But then once you've learned the skills, it's like, well, that's not the best way to apply them. It's just one really good way of learning them. And you can actually save a huge amount of time and paper if you just get on with it and get what you need to get, I think.
Yeah. And even though I trained in CRV, my personal method is a lot more abbreviated and freeform than the CRVs because I don't need those.
I know getting more than a couple of pages out of you is like getting blood out of a stone.
Yeah, Daz, your calligraphy method's quite beautiful. I'd like to learn more about it. And you know, CRV is something that it's not something I'm opposed to learning. I think that it just intimidated me at the time because it felt very much like, you know, if you learn to play music and you have to learn to read the notes. I was the kid who like took the notes through the mountain, tried to learn it by ear because I couldn't pay attention to the notes. So maybe we're just on the opposite ends of the spectrum as far as the way that we, you know, but I think CRV benefits a lot of people, and you know, it is a methodology, and it's the continuum that we in this profession want to support both ends.
My approach and the new approaches of using CRV, because I don't call it CRV anymore. My method that I call flow. I think it's CRV, but CRV with a modern twist. Really, I've taken out all the military feelings and thoughts and impressions and drilling and made it a bit more about the individual. And I think that's what makes it better. Really. I think the original CRV, as they train it, and they still do train it like that now, is a little bit too regimented for the non-military type person, really.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Especially if you trained under Ingo, like some of the guys did, you know, where he would, you know, make you work into the wee hours of the early morning continuously for, you know, day after day until you got it right.
I think it actually suited me quite well training that way. I got a lot out of it because I started off being really scrappy and trying to teach myself off random stuff that I found online. I tried teaching myself CRV out of that so-called manual, and that didn't work at all. That was a car crash, and did all sorts of other things. Actually, I missed out on loads of the basics. I didn't build strong foundations. You know, I was doing some really fancy advanced stuff, but then I couldn't tell you really basic stuff reliably. And then training in a formal method forced me to like get those basics down before you go on to the fun stuff, which I really needed to do. So it was good for that.
I wondered if Amaris could describe her method a bit more. You know, you say it's not like a formal CRV method. Now, if you were doing a remote viewing session for us right now, what format would it take? How would you get the data down for us to have a look at?
So I really go into like I need silence, but not dark. I don't want to be in a dark room. I need to be kind of in a sunny spot. I mean, I can do it in a dark room too. But you know, pad of paper or like an iPad in the note section, either way. And for me, I feel the pictures, so like they come in as a feeling. So I feel the strokes across the page. It's almost like you know, Andrew's a proponent of the Silva method, and he really talks about it kind of like a TV screen, and then seeing the picture appear on it. And I can really relate to that. I feel the strokes of the image, so I draw them as I feel them. And so if there's a line that it feels curved, I put it in, and that's not really that different from some of the CRV aspects, right? With the ideograms, I think that's the right term. And so, you know, I feel the image, so I just draw it out. And it's you know, and I'm an artist, but I can tell you these are not artistic images. They look like a 2-year-old could draw them, but they get the data, okay? And then I'll get just flashes of words. And sometimes and I'll say the intuitive side of us is not for example, okay, recently I was tasked with someone tasked me with a playing card, and it was just a practice run. It was a practice run. And they said, you know, any card. Um, and so when I went into the session, I kept seeing mushrooms. I'm like, come on, like what is a mushroom doing on a plant? There's no cards with mushrooms. And I was like, wait a minute, but you know, spades looks like a mushroom. I was like, that's how it looks, right? So I thought, okay, you know, I'm gonna go with spades. And then you know, and then the next thing I saw was like I kept feeling this forward motion, and it was like a horse, someone riding a horse. And I was like, who rides horses in the cards? Like there's no, but in the tarot, you know, the knight rides a horse. And so my mind used the tarot to get the correct answer, which was the jack. So you know, that's how intuitive works. It's for me, it's a symbol system. it pulls on what I know, but it's not always, it's not like a finely tuned system. It's kind of has its own mind, and I just have to go with it. It's worked well, but there's definitely no rhyme or reason to it that I wish I could make a methodology, but I really can't. Yeah.
Hey, if it works, it's all good, isn't it?
Yeah, exactly. Yes, absolutely.
In the end,
So
it doesn't matter what method we use, as long as we give good information to the person that needs it.
right. And you'll keep working in this field if you're given good information. That's essentially what it comes down to, right?
Absolutely, yeah.
Not all the time. We don't hit the target all the time. I certainly don't. And that's a really important piece in remote viewing for me, is that people realize that, because we could work professionally in this field and not get it all the time. And that's part of the work, is learning to internalize that and not let it stop you from
Absolutely. Yeah. Everyone has a good and bad day.
exactly.
Yeah, I say to people when they ask this, we're like a little bit like a performance artist. Some days our body and our minds are working perfectly. Sometimes, we have a code, or we're stressed or something, and it affects what we do. It's just one of those natural things.
Absolutely.
Yeah. I see that you've done some RVing for human trafficking and finding fugitives. Is there anything you can talk about with that kind of work that's, not confidential?
Okay. Yes, I can say that that's definitely work that I've done. I can't disclose, obviously, where I did that work, or with who, but there were in the case the both of those topics I worked with a really remarkable group of people. So we, worked as a unit. There was, and that's one of the more powerful things with remote viewing, is when you have a bunch of viewers working together, right? Just like Stargate, when you have more people working targets, and you can compare, some people are good at colors, some people are good at lines, some people are good at, getting the details, and we all had different strengths. So, where working together in a group, we were able to certainly make some to help some people, and that was a wonderful experience, and that happened very quickly after I started getting into this field. It was a very progressive, it happened very quickly that I got involved in that work, and it was kind of like being on a roller coaster, but the best roller coaster I've ever been on. I had so much fun, and I'll be honest with you, like, remote viewers are phenomenal people. They're just like fun, interesting. I've had a great time.
I saw on your website with regards to missing persons that you do a lot of like the initial vetting of clients and setting things up. I was curious if you could speak to like whatever kind of methodology you might be using in terms of like tasking targets out, or how that process kind of works from an administrative level with you and Angela.
So Angela and I, we have like we were able to like work with other groups. So we don't always do the administrative stuff ourselves. She might have a connection, I might have a connection, and that administrative aspect might fall to the people who are kind of running the projects. And there's people running projects in my country. There's people running projects in the USA. There's people running projects in Europe. This is all going on, and it's not governments even. It's just people who are privately interested in things. Um, so you have to kind of use your judgment when you're partnering with people. I think it's really important. You want to make sure that you're using your intuition in that regard. Are you partnering with people that you trust, that feel refutable, that they're telling you what they're doing, is what they're actually looking for. So if you're looking for a missing person, you want to make sure that the missing person they're looking for wants to be found. That's important. Because if you find out that they're doing some kind of, there are shady people out there who want to take advantage of remote viewing, and I've encountered, not personally, but I've had colleagues that have encountered some pretty some scary moments. So I'm very aware of kind of vetting people when I work with a group. So that's really important to me. And I haven't worked with any shady groups, I'll say that.
Well, I think all three of us, the psychic guys, have had past experience with some very shady people that got involved in remote viewing for nefarious goes. So yeah, we know what you mean with that.
The worst one of those I ever heard that was just for being crazy was this didn't happen to me. I'm not sure whether I can say who it happened to, so I won't. But he was working with another remote viewer, and they had a client, gave them a target, and they described this guy committing a murder, and then they had a debrief on the phone, and like he paid them, he paid the bill, had a debrief on the phone, and it was this guy, it was the client who'd committed the murder, and he'd never been caught. He'd got away with it.
Wow.
He couldn't tell anyone. So that was his way of like being seen and confessing without like incriminating himself. And he was like, "Yeah, you've described that perfectly. You're bang on." And then, you know, it was like if it was a fake name and the guy just disappeared, and it was like, "What?"
Wow.
Wow, that's scary. Yeah,
It's crazy.
yeah. And I was involved in semi-involved in a scenario where there was an infiltration of most of the remote viewing community a couple of years back by a group of people that were paying huge amounts of money to recruit remote viewers to do look at sports and all kinds of betting there, and then they were essentially selling that information on and they were frauding their clients that were paying for the information out of money, and the people involved eventually went to prison for fraud and child trafficking. So yeah,
Yeah. I mean, the financial remote viewing wasn't the problem, really. It was all the other stuff that was going on around that. And,
yeah,
you know, what those guys had been up to in the past and
yeah.
continue to be involved with was really sketchy.
That was a very dodgy moment for a lot of people in the remote viewing community that were being paid to do that kind of work at the time.
Well,
So
I
yeah,
think it was,
we are aware of that kind of stuff ourselves.
I think one of the aspects of that story that we don't talk about enough is that group's ties to political think tanks. That, like, obviously it's not the biggest part of the whole child trafficking ring stuff they were involved in, but it's wild to me that someone was able to just bankroll so many viewers and be pulling info for the Republican Party.
yeah, they were allegedly trying to dig up dirt on political candidates using remote viewing, which was,
Yeah.
Yeah.
yeah, that was a
So it's
crazy
great.
time.
It's great that Amaris is doing some kind of active vetting out there. It's a very important part of the
Right.
RV process.
You gotta try, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Because you know, David and Joshua and myself, we're heavily involved in lots of social media sites about remote viewing, and you see posts on there almost every day where people are like, you know, I want to hire a remote viewer. I've got a target I want them to do, and you always have to go out of your way to explain to them. Most remote viewers, if they're ethical, won't take a target off of someone they don't know off a public internet site because you know their skills could be used for nefarious purposes. So it's great that you're you know you're doing that, and you know there may be even some value. I don't know if you've explored this in setting up some kind of course to teach other people on how to set up
Mhm.
projects and to vet people and you know all that kind of stuff as well.
You know what? I'm gonna actually mention that to Angela because we're starting to like once we have an initial, we do a remote viewing one where we introduce, the basics, but then we're starting to teach remote viewing two in this month, and that might be a really important kind of additional
Absolutely. Yeah.
component. So I'm gonna talk to her about that.
It's
Thanks.
definitely a need in the community. I mean, we're, you know, tens of thousands of people are taught how to remote view, and then you're unleashed into the real world, and hardly anyone's ever taught how to run and manage and admin a project to a professional caliber.
Mm.
That absolutely, absolutely.
It's the unsexy stuff, isn't it? That everybody wants to be the rock star remote viewer and nobody wants to be the analyst.
Yeah,
I
I'd
think
really love to see more projects incorporating different sorts of analytical processes to evaluating these feedback events, because like there's an open source intelligence community out there. We could be digging deeper on a lot of the stuff that we're presenting and like verifying our data better. We could also do a lot better as a community to do more mixed methodology type stuff. Like there's a lot of people now who are starting to incorporate like astrological events and readings into things and trying to see what ways these different modalities of interpreting the future intersect. I think there's a lot of interesting like syncretic developments happening that we ought to do more of.
it's a great point. Yes, absolutely.
So before we get sidetracked putting the world to rights, Amaris, there's a few more things that I'd love to ask you about from your experience. Um, it says here that you are a dreamwalker.
Uh,
So is that being in other people's dreams and shared dreaming, or do I not know what that term means?
that is definitely not, I have had people show up in my dreams, but I've, to my knowledge, maybe someone else has experienced them, but they've never told me. I personally have never shown up in other people's dreams that I know of. But I definitely like the world of, like, maybe we could even say dream walking is like a combination of like lucid dreaming and astral travel for me. So I kind of experience, lucid states, where I've traveled to, different levels in the astral plane where I've been awake, like I've been aware of it. And then some of it is like, I don't know if any of you guys are astral travelers, but I'm just gonna like put a common experience that people with astral traveling have out there is that they'll kind of come to, and they'll be in their own house, but it'll look like their house. It'll be like the structure. Sometimes it even looks like it's made of static. It's the same, table, chairs, and everything. But then when you move through it, it's like almost like a static on a TV, but the layout's there. But sometimes I move into states where the layout isn't there. I'm somewhere else, and it almost has a dreamlike feel to it. But I'm lucid, so I'm aware. And then I'm communicating and experiencing kind of like spiritual experiences where I'm getting knowledge of different things in a remembered state versus kind of losing it to the
Okay. So this would be maybe going to some of the slightly higher astral planes, or whatever the planes are, where you meet the people who are worth talking to, and not that static thing you mentioned. That's interesting. You bring that up. I think I would describe that as everything being made of tiny points of light.
Yes.
I don't know if you've noticed this. I've noticed the color of the light changes. When I've had bilocation experiences in remote viewing that have been kind of astral sort of experiences, there's been made of blue points of light. And when I've done, practices of sort of trying to conjure stuff up in the astral plane, but while working in ritual awake in the physical plane, it's blue. And then when I've had some spontaneous experiences where it's green, and then some where it's just like full technicolor, and everything, that the classic super bright and sharp and realer than real kind of thing, where the colors are very vivid and everything. And that, I don't know what it means, the different colors, whether it means anything. Do you have any experience of that?
I do, but my colors are different than yours, so that's
Mm.
interesting.
Oh.
When I get into the astral states, at first it's very dull, like it looks like almost like a I'd almost like there's like almost like a dull purple overtone for me. Sometimes even brown. And then when I start to move or encounter things, the light changes. And then I get tunnels. Like I'll travel down what I would almost describe as like wormholes or
Mm.
warp tunnels, and they have kind of almost like Total Recall flashing lights, It's like but it's or like a lava lamp, and those have many myriad colors, but blue is a very common one that I experience in the tunnels. Green is also, and then also the multicolored.
Mm. Do you have that sensation of movement, kind of like being on a roller coaster when you're? Yeah, I think we probably, maybe we've been to some of the same places. We'll have to save that for part two.
The interesting thing about the colors, it had me thinking back to the tarot with Aleister Crowley's Thoth deck. One of the
Mhm.
things that the artwork in that deck, it employs the use, I believe they call it like the King's color scale, where
Oh,
he had these different associations for each card, where each house of the card was a different Kabbalistic world, and there was a different color scale associated with that. And as you shifted through, the colors also shifted. I wonder if there's any kind of connections there with your guys' respective mental states vis-a-vis those experiences out of body.
well, I mean, Alistair probably experienced all of it. I mean, if we anything, we know that Crowley was tapped in, in whoever he was tapped into, and no judgment. I wouldn't doubt it if he was, experiencing everything we're talking about, plus and incorporating it. Now that you mentioned that about his deck, I did notice that all the paintings do have color schemes. That's a great insight that
Yeah.
there you go. Yeah.
Lon Milo Duquette has a very informational book out there called Understanding Aleister Crowley's Thoth Tarot that does a good job of explaining each card and the artistic decisions behind those.
Wonderful.
I feel like completely none the wiser about the blue-green distinction. The green ones, I had a while where every time I would lay down to sleep, I would see faces drifting past me, you know, human or kind of human-ish, not looking at me, just kind of staring to, you know, ooh, straight past like that, just rows of, and it was really weird. They weren't doing anything, but they were in the green points of light, and there was just like a week that happened, and then it went away, and I was like, what was that? I have no idea. The blue ones, it tends to be stuff I've done deliberately or I'm expecting. And then when I'm sleeping, the full color one, I guess that's a kind of deeper immersion or a different level. But yeah, I don't know what they mean, but I would love to.
Sounds like you're tapping into kind of the field where mediums tap into, that green sounds. You know, I've been recently hearing this too. People say faces, you know, come by when they're sleeping, or even when they're in a meditative state, they'll just feel a face come in. And I can relate to that. Sometimes it's, you know, a face, sometimes it's a personality. I can feel people's personalities sometimes before I see them. And it sounds like you're in that energy.
That's interesting. Yeah, I mean, this was years ago. This happened. This was kind of like a phase on my journey when, you know, that you have these times when things get energetically very weird and you kind of go through a big change and you're like, well, I don't know what that was, like spiritual puberty. That whatever was going on there was going on, so I was just rolling with it. But I never kind of found out what it was about. They felt completely neutral. There wasn't any emotional personality. The faces weren't doing anything. They were just like drifting past in rows as well, just like more than one at a time. It was really weird, but it wasn't frightening. It was just perplexing, and I still don't know what that was. But that's an interesting idea about the yeah, whatever the mediumship thing is. I have had spontaneous mediumship experience once, which was an interesting comparison to remote viewing as an experience, because I'm used to, you know, remote viewing, you're pulling things towards you and saying, I want this, and then you get it. And then with mediumship, somebody just turns up like,
Oh, yeah.
hello. And you're going, oh, whoa. Usually it's me who puts things in that part of my awareness.
Agreed. I had my first spontaneous mediumship experience. I had that as well. It scared me. Yeah.
Oh, could you tell us a little about that?
Sure, yeah. So this happened around the same time as, you know, the awakening. I had started using the tarot and this and that. And my grandmother died. My father's mother died around that time, and she was a knitter, and I'm a knitter. We're, you know, that's part of my way I keep myself sane. Okay, it's the knitting. It's a mindful practice. And my father gifted me all of her knitting books after she'd passed. And so I was sitting in my living room, and I thought, you know what, I haven't gone through these. I'm going to look through them and see if there's something I could make. And as I sat down and put them in my lap, I could feel somebody reading over my shoulder. And I thought, oh, that's really weird. Why would I feel that? You know, and then I felt this love just overtake me. It was this really powerful feeling of love. And I could see this person looking at the books. And my grandmother, when I say she was a knitter, I mean, she did it for like, I'd say if she was sitting, she was knitting. Okay. I mean, it rhymes for a reason. For her, it was the truth. And you know, I could feel her love for these books. And I was like, oh my gosh, this is my grandma. And I could just feel it. And it was just like this presence. And it was just very calming and loving and just letting me know, hey, you're tapped into this world and I'm here with you. And this is something we share. And I just sat and cried, you know, probably for a good hour. My husband was napping at the time, and he woke up and he's like, oh my God, what did I miss? You look really upset. It's good. I'm like, it's good. Don't worry. And he was really, of course, you know, being the guy that he's interested in these things, he was really excited to hear that. So, and then from there, I've had lots of mediumship experiences, but you know, that was the big one that started it all.
So is that something you do deliberately now? Do you do readings or
It is.
anything? Or
Well, see, with readings, I'll be honest, like I like doing readings. It's something I enjoy, but I really enjoy educating people. It's like my passion is to teach people to find their own magic. Like I love teaching remote viewing, I love teaching the tarot, I love teaching all of these things, channeling. Like these are all things that I think are very powerful tools for us to discover that we're living in a non-material universe. And when we become aware of that, that's the real power of life, is not feeling, you know, stuck to our job, stuck to our school, stuck to our body. So I really feel that my work is to help people get in touch with that truth about life. But yeah, my mediumship, I do. You know, actually, my husband and I, sometimes we sit on the couch at night and we just like open up the channel and we see who comes in, and we've had some interesting guests. I'll just say that.
that's great fun. Can we subscribe to that podcast?
Well, you know, when it comes out, you'll be the first to know, David.
Yeah, that sounds great. We should start doing that. It would be way easier to schedule.
Yeah, really. You know, it's a lot of fun. It's
We'll just channel the guests.
there's something really chatty. You know, there's some people on the other side who are really chatty, and that's how I learned how to do personality. So one of the things that Angela does in remote viewing is famous personalities when she's teaching. But I did that on my couch for a year before ever taking remote viewing, just hanging out, and I would sit and I would sit in the open, kind of like open channel space, right? Do my grounding and protection, and then just kind of open the channel, and the people would come in, and what they would do is they would show me things about themselves. So I'd get them to give me clues, and I would compile a clue list and say, okay, this person has this many children. They probably lived in this city. They were very fashionable. They showed me some, one of the weirder ones that came through for me was Andy Warhol. And I didn't know it was at the time, but I kept getting like, New York City, all this color, living a very explosive lifestyle. But the weird thing that I was shown was a garbage can of money being dumped on somebody's head. I was like, what? I was like, what is that? Like, come on, But that's how the intuitive works. So then when I finally put the pieces together and I went online and put in the data, it told a story about Andy Warhol getting a garbage can full of money dumped on his head for his birthday that he had. And it was like, yeah. So I was like, oh, this works. So the game became a very real thing. And so we started practicing it regularly and just had a really great time with it.
What a great, fun way to learn.
Oh yeah, it was a blast. We still do it on occasion when I'm not too busy. I've got to slow down, get back to my mediumship games, Yeah.
That's great. We should try that.
Mm.
Brilliant. So I think speaking about your passion for teaching and leading people to kind of discover that bigger reality is a brilliant segue into you telling us about your upcoming course. Is it a tarot instruction that you're beginning soon?
Yes. So on November 17th, I'm going to be starting a course. It's an introductory course to the tarot, but I have a book that I use that accompanies it as a textbook, which I didn't write, someone else wrote. But it's very in line with my theories. But for me, when I teach the tarot, I don't teach people, just the basics. I really want them to understand it as a kind of a living practice. It's not something, it's a system, it is, but it's more than that. It's a very personal tool for transformation. And it can really, if you can move through the fear and move through the cards and allow yourself to kind of integrate the cards and the symbology with yourself and awake to it, it can be a very transformational tool, and it can help you really grow up in life. And if you're somebody who's introspective and kind of independent, it's especially helpful. As I'm someone who's, can get a bit logical. So it can help me. It's helped me a lot. And I think that for certain people, it's especially helpful, but for all people, it's a wonderful tool to not be afraid of. Because I mean, there's a lot out there about the tarot from horror movies that is not true. As someone who's a therapist, psychologist, or sorry, not psychologist, social worker, I'm all about promoting mental health and mental wellness. And I think if the tarot used effectively and understood properly, you can really use it to have like an independent sort of inner counselor at times. But you have to really work with it correctly. And so I try to give people a really ethical introduction to it, and kind of sway them away from the horror and though there is magic in the tarot, it is a very magical practice. I try to give people the positive understanding of it so that they can use it for healing. So that's what I'd say about my perspective on tarot. It's a very healing focus. But yeah, we're doing a basics. It's an intro course, and then from there I have 2 additional levels that people can work on, where I get a little bit more esoteric and conceptual with how the cards interacting with the cards, and professional practice as well.
Oh, wow. So there's 4 courses in total.
There'll be 3 altogether. Yeah, so I'm going to run the intro course starting November 17th. It's just a 6-week course. And then from there in January, February, I'll be doing a level 2, and I might throw in another level 1 depending on how many people. And I really want people to be authentically, kind of coming to it. So I try to vet people for their interest. But I welcome people to join, because it's just, to me, remote viewing, tarot, all this stuff, it's an expression of joy. And if I can bring people kind of to meet it in that way, then my job's well done.
Fantastic. Where can people go to find more information about this and sign up for the course?
Yeah, so my website is amarisjane.com, and that kind of has, some introduction to my work, and I'll be posting some registration information about the course there. And then also they can email AngelaFordRV@gmail.com. That's Angela and I, that's our inbox, and we kind of do all of our coursework from that email. So those two places are probably the best way to find us. And we're going to be doing another remote viewing one coming up in January as well.
Awesome.
Fantastic. Well, we'll put the links for that down in the show notes so people can go click on that. Does anybody have anything to add before
I
we
do.
wrap up?
I do. I don't think we can go anywhere without just asking a little bit about the childhood experiences with non-humans and greys. 'Cause
Oh yeah.
they're hot
Okay.
topics.
Yeah, okay. So I started getting, actually, it wasn't when I was a child when I got gray visitations. It was, I've had non-human and visitations throughout my childhood with what I would describe as like angel beings and you know, I'm not sure what they are, but there's definitely some other types of beings out there which aren't quite as angelic. They're a little bit stranger. But then when I went through my awakening, I started having visitations from the Greys. It was a very the dreams were very like they were that like dreamwalking state where it was like a very lucid awake state. But I was the one that stands out the most was I woke up and I was in a room that looked kind of like a kennel for a human. It's the only way I can describe it. It was like a box and it had kind of like a door, windows. It was very small, enough for a human to kind of survive. And I opened the door and I went out into this hall. And when I looked down, it was almost like the Matrix, where there was like these endless doors to my right. And when I looked down, it was just like it kept going like a endless, right? And then when I looked up, I could see I was in some kind of ship of some kind, and it was the environment. Like I felt afraid. I was wearing like a hospital gown, and could feel lost. I started to panic, and I started to kind of get scared, and so I started to run, and I ran up this staircase, and when I got to the top or second landing, I started to float, and I floated up, and I was like on my back, kind of just floating in this hospital gown, and um, and I felt something take over my body. And I have experienced this in some spirit, like during sleep paralysis and things like that. But this was different. It was intelligent. And so I felt like a consciousness interact with mine, but it froze me. And so I was kind of just like hovering, but I could kind of see, and I could see down to my left that there was a tall gray being standing at like a console. It looked like almost like a control system, but it didn't have any like tools. It was almost like a board with like they can move their hands across it and things would um but then when I looked up, I was in like cathedral in space. So it was like this huge window that must have been like 5, 6 stories high. And it was like this massive room. And I floated as I was floating up, I was terrified. And I'm not sure yet like what the nature of the fear was, just because of there's a lot of layers to this. Okay, let's see. So the next thing I heard a voice and it said to me, Amaris, do you want to know what's happening in the world? And I said, I was so scared. I said, no, tell Jason. That's my husband's name. I said, tell Jason. And I was so scared. And so that was like, 'cause at that time, this was all new to me. I was like, he actually is interested in this stuff, you guys. It's not me. Get out of here. He's the guy you should be visiting. Don't leave me alone. Um, and so, but then the next thing I knew, I was standing on the balcony of an apartment building and I was looking out, and there was like this nuclear bomb going off in the distance. And it was like this nuclear disaster. And I was like, what is going on? And then boom, I was awake. And so that was the first one I had. And I can tell you that the feeling I had was that the consciousness was a predatory one, in the sense that it was stronger than us. It felt like a shark or like a cat that was bigger than me. It didn't threaten me though. This is the interesting thing. I didn't feel threatened, but it was its very being, its very personality, its aura was just so powerful that it would just dwarfed anything that was in me to feel powerful. So I've had subsequent experiences where I've been instructed on how to get used to the energy that they emit, that they've acknowledged that it's repellent to humans, and that they've shown me sort of, I don't want to say a protocol because it's not an exact protocol, but a way to move so that showed me how they can weave into our energy and we can move with them. I have not pursued this, okay, because it scared me so much. They gave me the instructions, but I've not pursued it because I tend to be a bit more love and light. than that. But I do get, so now when I'm in states of channeling, I do get visitations from them, but they come through very easily. And I don't know if I've just done the work because I've just done so much psi work. I don't need to use this protocol, that it's already happened to me. But so they come through sometimes when I'm just doing my nighttime mediumship games. Sometimes I can feel one come through and I'm like, okay, not right now, guys. This is too intense. So but yeah, I haven't really had anything but helpful information from them. They haven't harmed me, but I'm not too certain that they're the ones I'm choosing to work with either.
Sounds very
Yeah.
interesting. Do you think would you class yourself then as a potential abductee or what they call it experiencer, or do you think this is just like a one or two time event?
I certainly would consider myself an experiencer. Abductee, I don't know. I don't know how to, if I would use that. But like almost. Maybe there's like a fine, if there's a continuum of experience, abductee and it being an experiencer. I think I've experienced so much phenomena that there's a potential that I've got a bit of a thick skin, Maybe it doesn't scare me quite as much. But on the other side of things, I wouldn't say that I've ever been like in a medical, like, and I know lots of people have, and I have good friends that do have these abduction experiences, which I don't feel that I share. So
Right.
yeah, it's on the edge.
I
Very
think
interesting.
the distinction between abductee and experiencer is like, are these abduction experiences really happening in physical reality, or are these more like out of body things that are going on where people wake up and they're having that experience and they think, well, the physical plane's the only place I'm used to, so that must be where I am, right? But yeah, Amaris, the experience you had waking up in the kennel and floating around in this ship, I mean, would you interpret that as being a physical reality that you were experiencing, or is it more of a kind of construct in one of the non-physical realms, do you think?
That's an interesting question to ask me because I'm not sure that I believe that we live in a physical construct. That I think we live in the appearance of a material construct for the purposes of learning, but I don't believe this is a material construct that we live
Hmm.
in. So when we have these experiences, I think that they are just another. Because I don't know if they are another dimension because sometimes they're the same. Like, as astral travelers, we know these dimensions are not very far apart from each other. So where we are exactly, I don't know. But it sometimes overlaps with the appearance of material reality, and sometimes it is its own kind of zone, so to speak, or area. And for that particular experience, I'm not sure. I'm not sure which. It felt very real, but I feel like a lot of they felt very material, rather. That's what I'll say. But I think a lot of us who have these experiences would say, they feel very material. So if material reality isn't real, is it real or is it,
Hmm.
like this is Pandora's
Yeah,
box.
I could have phrased that better, I suppose. Like, whatever this is, wherever this thing
Okay.
is, was it here with all this squishy meat suits, or was it somewhere else that we can go?
Maybe both. I think the psi experiences I've had, that one was probably felt a little bit more material than some of the other ones I've had, which were definitely more conceptual, and image based and invited to kind of a different space. That one did feel a little bit more meat suity.
Awesome.
And I
Thanks for sharing those with us.
suppose our listeners will probably be a bit upset if one of us doesn't ask you what happened in the curtain story before we let you go.
Oh,
Yes.
well
Okay.
remembered.
Okay, that's probably my favorite story from when we were growing up. I think this was probably around the time that the phenomenon really, like the poltergeist activity, really showed up strongly. Um, my mother had, I think, Daz, you were saying that people walking around the house, that was something that, that was a big one for my mom. And that really scared us because as a single parent, she's, if there's a man, and when she said there was a man in our house, it was a big man, whoever this man was, making a real clatter, thumping down the hallway. And she was really scared. And I can remember her coming out with a baseball bat and swearing and saying, you know, some very creative words, picturing her kind of like a superhero going, come on, let's go. Where are you? Opening every closet, ready to knock whoever was out with a baseball bat to protect her children. That's my mother. But there was nobody there. So like, that's really confusing. And so after one particular night where there had been some activity, we were all really kind of on edge. And we were sitting in the living room, we had finished dinner and we were just kind of sitting around, and we had these curtains in our living room, which were on like a pulley system that if you pulled them, they'd open and close. And so we were all just kind of sitting there, just kind of chilling out, and all of a sudden the curtains started to go like this and slowly open. And I looked at my mom, and my sister looked at me, and my brother was playing video games, distracted, whatever. And we just kind of went, okay, that's weird. We all were looking at each other like, did one of you pull that, right? Did you pull the cord? And then, no, okay. And then they went a little bit more. And we were, all now we're all just watching like it's a movie. And then they whipped open like this, and then they closed, and then they opened. And I think collectively were kind of on pause because we were so shocked, but then we all kind of screamed at the same time. And we went, ah! And we kind of just looked at each other, and my mom, she just like, get in the car. She said, get in the car. So we all got in the car, and we didn't even know where we were going. It was night. It was probably like 8 or 9 at night on a school night. And we parked on the street, but we were also curious about what was going on. I was like, are these things still going to go and open and close while we're already in the car? So then we sat from the street and watched the curtains open and close from the street. And the window had this light on it, so you could really get a good look at these curtains. And they were just like, and then we were just like, my mom just went, whew. She's like, hey, get that pedal to the metal. We're out of here, And then we went and got a friend of ours, a friend of hers, rather. Her husband was a security guard. And so we felt at that time, I thought he was the expert. He could come and look at the house and understand what was going on. Poor guy. He's like, you're sending me into a haunted house. Great, great advice. But he did. He was so nice. He came to the house. He looked around. He looked for intruders, didn't see anybody, and kind of said, check mark, you guys are safe to come back if you want to. We're like, oof, I don't know. But then we went and looked at the curtains after. And the craziest part was that the curtains had all been tied. The strings that the curtains were in were tied in knots. So there was like a big bunch of knots. And if I had been alive during the era that everybody had phones, I would have had lots of pictures for you guys. But no, this was not that time. We were just kind of stunned, and we saw these knots all tied, and we went like, oh, what's next? And there was lots next. But that was probably the experience that stands out for me the most, as like the most visceral of all of the encounters that we shared as a family.
This sounds like an incredibly exciting and interesting haunting.
Yeah.
I think we're going to have to save some of the other experiences for part 2. Thank you so much for joining us. This has been a wonderful discussion. It's been brilliant hearing about your journey through all these strange happenings up to where you are now. And thank you to our listeners for joining us too. Do remember to check out Amaris's tarot course upcoming on November 17th. Links will be in the show notes, so get in touch with her or with Angela for that. And with that, I think, unless there's any other questions I've forgotten to ask, I think it is time to say good night or good morning.
Yeah, thank you very much for sharing.
Thank you so much for having
Thank
us.
you for your
It was a lot of fun.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was great to be invited. Thank you.
All right. Bye, everyone.
Penetrating sucking aliens.
Have you ever felt like right?
Have you ever had an extra right up your which I've been
There's something that started to